What happens if we practice gratitude 10 minutes a day?
A person who understands that I'm going to go for 10 or 15 minutes just feeling gratitude or thinking about all the things I'm grateful for. I promise you, the person who does that after a period of time, as a side effect, the opportunities coming to them.
I know my reality. I'm not the version who I want to be. How do they think and create of that future which they can't even see?
Well, you have one of two choices, to disbelieve or believe. If you choose to be a chronic disbeliever, then you'll find reasons in your life to reaffirm that disbelief. I was just looking at a testimonial the other day. The guy had a 9.5-inch tumor on his kidneys. The chemo wasn't working. The radiation wasn't working. None of the diets worked. One of two options.
Now coming to today's episode. What if you could change your entire personality? What if your anxiety, your trauma, the habits you can't break, the version of you that you really hate, all of that could be changed? What if you could unleash the power of your mind, of your thoughts, and achieve the absolute goals of your life, which are the biggest, and be able to achieve all your dreams as well? What if all of that was possible? Our today's guest is going to tell you exactly how. Our today's guest is Dr. Joe Dispenza, the man who proved that your thoughts can heal your body, heal your body. He has healed so many diseases. He has helped so many people walk again. He's trained all around the world to do exactly this and unleash the power of your brain. He researches neuroscience. He works with a lot of institutions and try to understand what can your mind do and what are the possibilities. So by the end of this episode, you will also understand why you've been stuck and how exactly you can turn your life around. Let me start with something that I've never shared this publicly ever. And so there are a lot of nights where after I've had a great podcast or I've won something and I'm like, it's a big day, right? And I'm winning in my life and I'm making money. I think I've done something successfully, right? Even after that, when I go back home, I sit down and I'm almost about to sleep. I have these thoughts that, shit, I'm not good enough? What if tomorrow all of this goes away? What if this success I can't recreate? What if all of this is luck? And these spiral thoughts just keep coming in again and again. And I almost doubt myself to the point where it's like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and I can't sleep and I keep overthinking. And I'm sure there are so many people like me who go through the same thing. So what's going on in my mind? Why am I thinking about all these things even on the days when I'm winning?
Yeah, I think it's common for people, we create based on lack, right? Many people see something that they want and they realize that they don't have it. And the natural thing is to create what you don't have. So it's natural to create based on lack. And then we have to get up and work really hard to accomplish and then produce an outcome. When we produce the outcome, the experience then takes away the lack because the emotion from the experience fulfills that lack. And then it's only transient. And then that lack kind of comes back again. And it causes us to speculate, what if I don't succeed? And it's common, but what we discovered with people that do this, when we look at their brains in real time, is that when we analyze our life like that and we ruminate, we tend to make our brain worse. In other words, by doing that and overthinking and overanalyzing, you're narrowing your focus on something. And you're doing that because the hormones of stress, right? The chemicals of stress are arousing your brain to live in survival and say, what if I lose everything that I have? When you're thinking within that emotion, you're actually causing your brain to experience more of those emotions and you get caught in this loop, right? So the point is that none of that is good for you. In fact, you're actually turning on the stress response just by thought alone. And those chemicals of stress become addictive, right? And so not knowing this, many people don't know this, but they're doing this just for some rush of adrenaline. And you can do that for hours because when you're in stress and you're in survival, you actually have to narrow your focus on the cause. And people become over-focused, and they overanalyze themselves, and they overanalyze their lives, and they make their brain worse. Even when they have everything that they want, the big fear is, what if I lose it, right? Yeah. So the fear then is the issue, right? So then I would say to someone like you got to face off with that fear, and you got to make sure that fear cannot influence your life in any way. And that's the emotion that you have to change.
You said that's the fear that I got to influence, and that fear has an influence on my life in some sort of way, right? Sometimes I wonder, and I think that maybe it's a good thing. And I let it drive because I feel like this every time after every big opportunity, I work harder the next day because I overthink about it. I'm really, really bothered by everything, and that's why it helps me. Is that a good way of thinking? Or
how old are you?
I'm 29 now.
29. Well, I think it's normal. First of all, I think a little agitation or a little fear is a good driver, right? I think it motivates us because people don't want to fail, right? And they want to succeed, or they don't want to do the wrong thing or make the wrong choice. So it's natural for us to have a little bit of a stimulation like that. When it gets overly active, then it gets in our way. So once again, I don't think it's bad, but if it drives you to kind of do more, I think it's great. But I don't think it's the ultimate reason why we should be doing things, right? Your ultimate desire maybe is not to live your whole life in fear,
of course not,
but to live in a state of wholeness or a state of connection or a state of gratitude or a state of love. And I think we reach a certain point in our life where we just start questioning, is this loving to me? Living this way, is it loving to me? So at 29 years old, when I was 29 years old, I had a lot of ambition. I still have a lot of ambition, but I think I have a lot more experience in life. And that just comes, over time. So as long as the fear doesn't get in the way for you creating the life that you want, or that you get addicted to that emotion, I think it's healthy to have a little bit of fear. It kind of drives you a little bit, arouses you a little bit, but just don't go too far with it.
But let's say there are people who are feeling these fears, and they are feeling these negative emotions every night, and they're overthinking, and that is not helping them in their lives. How do they stop it?
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why we teach people that the reason that we use meditation is not to heal or to create success or whatever, or abundance, or to have a mystical experience, but we use meditation as a way to change, right? And so to become conscious of those unconscious thoughts that you think when you're feeling fear, it's so important to become so conscious that you don't go unconscious to those thoughts again. In other words, just because you have a thought doesn't necessarily mean it's true, right? And if the anxiety and the worry and the fear is something that you experience on a daily basis, then in meditation, you have to become so conscious that you don't go unconscious and let that fear run you. And then how do you behave? Do you stay up and ruminate over those what-if scenarios in your life? You have to become so conscious that you don't go unconscious and fall back into that habit again. And so the act of remembering and not forgetting in your meditation is exactly how you change, right? So then that unlearning process, there's only part of it. Then there's a relearning process. Like you have to break the habit of the old self, but then you have to reinvent the new self. So in your meditation, to become familiar with the way you think, to become familiar with the way you act, to become familiar with the way you feel. The word meditation means to become familiar with, to know thyself. And then in the reinvention process, what do I want to think? Let me remember how I do want to think in that situation and change in that moment and think different thoughts. And the only way I'm going to be able to think those different thoughts is not when I'm struggling in those emotional states. I have to program my brain in my meditation to begin to think in a different way. What do I want to believe? And a belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over again. So with intention and with your attention, let me remember what I do want to believe. And if you keep thinking that thought over and over again, nerve cells that fire together wire together. You begin to install the hardware in your brain. But that's not enough. You have to do it enough times that those circuits begin to fire more automatically. They begin to hardwire. And now that becomes the new voice in your head. How do I want to behave? Or how do I want to act when I'm feeling fear? What is an alternative? What does greatness look like? What would be loving to myself? Let me sit up in that state when I'm feeling that fear, and let me go into it and let me change it, right? So let me rehearse in my mind. Let me review how I'm going to behave. Mental rehearsal, the act of closing your eyes and choosing a different behavior. The research shows if you're truly present, the brain does not know the difference between the real life experience and what you're imagining. So the brain begins to fire and wire new circuits to look like you already did the act, right? Keep doing it and it becomes a software program, and it's more easy for you to behave that way because you've primed the brain. In other words, if you don't prime the brain and you're struggling, you have no circuitry to use, right? Yeah. And then you have to say, okay, let me practice feeling a different emotion. Instead of fear, let me practice feeling gratitude. Let me see how many times I could bring up the feeling of gratitude. And if you, in your meditation, could bring it up over and over again, remember to feel this way, and you keep doing it over and over again, you're making chemicals, right? And if you keep doing it, you can condition your body to feel that feeling more automatically. And you can begin to become familiar with a new way of thinking. You can become familiar with a new way of acting, and you become familiar with a new way of feeling. And I think a lot of people just think that they have to stay stuck in there, and they try to think positively when they're feeling really negatively, right? And that's not the solution. The work is, okay, now that I'm realizing that I'm struggling in the evenings, I got to do the inner work, not when I'm struggling, but when I start my day or before I go to sleep at night. Let me remind myself where I'm not going to go, right? Let me remind myself what thoughts that I'm not going to entertain. Let me remind myself when I feel that fear that I could settle that emotion down. And when I start ruminating and I start acting this way, I got to remember that that's how I used to behave. I'm going to begin to change when I begin to think differently, when I begin to act differently, and I begin to feel differently. Now, theoretically, it sounds easy, but there's no other alternative unless you rely on something outside of you to change your internal state. So the act of changing from one state of mind and body to another state of mind and body, and priming your brain and body to have the biology, the circuitry, the chemistry in place. If you keep doing it, you'll begin to choose to think that way more often, choose to act that way more often, choose to feel that way more often. And I think that process is, it takes a little bit of time. But if you keep doing it, people change all the time.
There are so many things